go. All right, we are live. Whew. All right, sorry, YouTube. Forget that little brain fart we had just a minute ago where we were live but not really able to be seen. We got a lot to get into today because, yes, Snap is broken, but your bank might be too. I don't know if people are aware of what's happening with our banking industry right now. I want to talk about this a little bit because we're in a situation where, quite frankly, the runs on banks are something we have not seen in a very long time. But this feels particularly pertinent because just this weekend, when I was talking with our dear friends in Tucson, Arizona at the NAACP Tucson Branch's Freedom Fund, one of the things I talked about extensively was the Great Depression, which was triggered by the stock market crash of 1929. You might be thinking, why does this matter? We're supposed to be talking about Snap. Yes, we all gonna talk about Snap. But y'all remember when Muhammad Ali would yell out, "The champ is here"? It was like this bold declaration that he, the champion, would not be denied. His presence was extraordinarily bold. He was extraordinarily unapologetic and undeniably aggressive. And when he would run around yelling, "The champ is here," it was a signal that what you gonna do is deal with me. I am now in the room. You're going to have to handle me. Well, friends, guess what? Recession is here. Yeah, I said recession because while Americans are now officially more hungry because the Republicans broke Snap and told Democrats, hey, man, you either going to let us cancel people's health care or you're going to let us cancel their food. You get to choose, but we ain't doing nothing with this government coming back open unless we get to either cancel one or the other, either health care or medical care. You pick which one, or I said health care or medical care. Health care or food, you pick which one, and if you don't choose, the government will just stay closed. This is important because as we learned last night on the Win with Black Women call from economist extraordinaire Dr. Suzanne Malveaux, she pointed out that there are already 22 states in these United States whose economies meet the definition of recession, which she defines, or she shared the definition with us, which was 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. And there are 22 states in the union that currently meet that definition today. Now, just when American generosity and mutual aid was beginning to be a thing, and we're talking now about SNAP benefits because we're going to talk about why your bank is broken, asking for payday loans from the Federal Reserve in just a minute. But just when American generosity and mutual aid was becoming a thing, the U.S. Department of Agriculture told grocery stores who are willing to donate food, what you can't do is that. What you cannot do is that. And this is significant because as we learned from Catherine Rampell, who is an MSNBC anchor and a co-host of The Weekend, she herself is an economist and she has written extensively about economic issues. We learned over the weekend that the U.S. Department of Agriculture told grocery stores who were willing to donate food to SNAP recipients, because grocery stores recognize that SNAP recipients are hungry. They're going to be hungry. And by the time you get to the end of the month, any of you who have ever had food stamps, you know that you already been hungry because your food stamps never get you to the end of the month, despite the fact that we have a whole host of artificial intelligence videos, slop, basically pretending to create videos of black women who are claiming that they buy steaks with their snaps. They sell their snaps for cash. They've got 10 baby daddies and 48 children. And like you have news outlets like Fox News who actually ran stories on this. And a lot of you are being very generous, suggesting that, oh, Fox News got tricked by AI videos. Do you honestly expect us to believe that Fox News, a racist ass news outlet, which always tells racist ass stories about black people, actually got snookered into believing these were AI videos? They knew they were AI videos and they chose to run it anyway. Y'all got to stop giving people a pass when they don't deserve it because you're racist until proven otherwise, Fox News. But grocery stores were like, listen, people who get SNAP benefits are going to be hungry. SNAP recipients take up approximately or provide approximately 30% of our revenue. So people are going to be hungry. We're going to have extra food because people ain't going to be able to buy the food. The food's going to go bad. We should give the food away. And they were willing to do mutual aid, which we have been asking people to do. The grocery stores were excited about doing this. And then the U.S. Department of Agriculture decided to send an email to grocery stores telling them that they are prohibited from offering special discounts to customers who have been affected by the SNAP funding lapse. She says that she is aware of at least 2 stores that had been willing to offer struggling consumers a discount, and then they had to withdraw it after they got this email. Here's what the email says from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Oh, and you know what? Let me share my screen so you all can see it, so that you all understand exactly what time it is. So this letter from the U.S. Department of Agriculture says the following. Reminder, retailer notice, SNAP EBT authorized retailers must comply with the SNAP equal treatment rule. You must offer eligible foods at the same price and on the same terms and conditions to SNAP EBT customers as other customers, except that sales tax cannot be charged on SNAP purchases. You cannot treat SNAP EBT customers differently than any other customers. Offering discounts or services only to SNAP paying customers is a SNAP violation violation unless you have a SNAP equal treatment waiver. Now, as a result of getting this email, grocery stores were like, ooh, okay, what we can't do is that. And I was at first like, well, that's fucked up. How do you mean you understood people are so hungry and you were willing to give them food, and just because the USDA tells you can't do it, you decide not to do it? That's some bullshit. But then, this is why you got to read the fine print. What we learned from Catherine Rempel is that grocery stores are scared for real good reasons, because if you are caught violating this prohibition, you could be denied the ability to get SNAP benefits in the future. So in low-income areas where SNAP shutdowns are having some of the biggest impacts, she says, getting thrown off of SNAP as a grocery store could mean that the store is no longer financially viable. Now, basically what the federal government is saying is, we know that there are poor people, and we know that those people are poor because we have effectively implemented policies that were designed to make them poor, but what you cannot do is help them, because helping them is racism or economicism against the wealthy. And if you are going to provide discounts to the people who are poor because we made them poor, then who's going to help the people who are still having money? That's not fair to them. So basically, the federal government just did to poor people what they've been doing to black people, which is to say, yes, we understand that you have been victimized by racism because we created the racism, we profit from the racism, we benefit and promulgate the racism. But if we are going to provide a solution to the benefits that you have not been able to receive because of the racism, that's not fair to the whites. And if you're going to be unfair to the whites, well, then you can't move at all. And essentially, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Rollins is now more focused on claiming that the administration is rooting out SNAP fraud. SNAP is one of the programs in our federal government that has the lowest levels of fraud of any of the federal programs. And quite frankly, it's disgusting that we are here. But what you got to know is it's not just that SNAP is broke. You should also know that SNAP machinery and technology and the capacity for governors, Democratic governors largely, because Republican governors have said, fuck you, poor people, but Democratic governors were saying, you know what, we can move some things around in our budget. We've got a little bit of flexibility, not a whole lot, because we're losing hundreds of billions of dollars out of our collective distribution from the federal government. But there are some things we can move around. We might be able to ensure that people are going to get their needs met. And then we find out from Representative Angie Nixon from the state of Florida that that can't happen because Donald Trump broke the machines and the passageway and the software that is going to allow governors to do that. So even governors who were planning to give people access to benefits anyway, they have now been told that they cannot do that. Amina, if you could please pull up the video clip of Representative Angie Nixon, we can get ready to play that right now. Go right ahead.
Hey everyone, it's Florida State Representative Angie Nixon here. Let me tell you how jacked up Donald Trump is. So there are some governors across the country that have decided, yeah, they will declare a state of emergency, or they will put some of their state funding, their rainy day funding, into the coffers for SNAP benefits. Clearly, Ron DeSantis ain't doing that. But the governor of Illinois just stated that he signed a declaration to allow $20 million to be loaded up into SNAP cards. And the president disabled the machines. So now these folks can't even use their cards because Donald Trump disabled the machines. Now, Donald Trump can stand to lose a few meals.
A couple.
But to keep
many
meals off the tables of children, you gotta be one nasty mother.
She said you got to be one nasty motherfucker, for those of you who couldn't get the context. And this is important because the cruelty isn't just the point. This is who these people are. These are some of the most anti-Christ, non-loving, hateful ass people we have ever known. And considering the overall state of the economy, you would think that they should be tapping into a little bit of generosity, because it ain't just that SNAP is broke. Your bank is out here getting whole ass payday loans on Halloween. I don't know if y'all heard about this, but Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell spearheaded the injection of $29.4 billion into the banking system, which is basically the biggest repo operation since 2020. This is, let me actually back up here. Let me explain a couple of concepts. I am not an economist. I'm just going to give y'all some Investopedia definitions so we can all be on the same page. Let's talk about liquidity. Liquidity is what you have when an asset can be efficiently, according to Investopedia, I'm reading you the definition, when an asset can be efficiently converted into ready cash without affecting its market value, it is considered a liquid asset. asset. The ability to convert it quickly and efficiently is called liquidity. Consequently, the availability of cash to make such conversions is the biggest influence on whether a market can move efficiently. Now, the more liquid an asset is, the easier and more efficient it is to turn it back into cash. Here's why this is a problem. Because basically, the banks ain't got no money. The banks ain't got no money. According to Reuters, the Fed's standing repo facility lent a total of $50.35 billion on Friday night to eligible financial firms in two separate availabilities, the highest ever usage since the tool was put in place back in 2021 to provide fast loans collateralized with Treasury or mortgage bonds. Your banks are broke. The banks are broke. And so the banks had to, on a Friday night while you was out trick-or-treating, basically going to the Fed like, hey man, can we get that payday loan? We gonna need an advance on our money because we ain't got no money. According to Bloomberg, global markets are now flashing signals that liquidity is drying up. When your liquidity dry up, your bank account is frozen. You ain't got no more money. And considering the poor people is already poor, the wealthy ass president who had a roaring 20s style gala over the weekend. Did y'all see this? It was like Great Gatsby in the 2025 version. They had dancers, they had food, they had performances. There was all sorts of women in feathers and dancing around and shaking other titties and all sorts of legs and live women in life-size champagne glasses. It was the most disgusting display of wealth, considering this is happening at the same time that 42 million people are now hungry and they ain't got no SNAP. But according to Bloomberg, pockets of global money markets are coming under strain as central banks have been pulling back easy money policies, just as governments are boosting debt issuance, luring cash away from the financial system. The Fed's main liquidity facility, the reverse repo facility, is nearly empty. And bank reserves have dropped as the government is rebuilding its cash pile after raising the debt ceiling this summer while the central bank kept on tightening its portfolio. As a result, short-term rates in money markets where banks borrow and lend to each other have risen across a range of instruments and remain stubbornly elevated since the beginning of September. That's why your bank need a payday loan. That's why your bank need a payday loan. But you know, you probably ain't gonna listen to me. I get it. I understand it because who am I? I'm just a black lawyer who be studying shit and read a whole lot. But you may not have to listen to me. I figure maybe if you listen to a white man who speaks with a southern drawl, you might listen to him talk to you about what this means for all the people. I mean, if you could please pull up the video clip of Texas Paul Schroeder so we could hear what he has to say. And if my screen would ever refresh and then could actually listen to it. Okay, here we go. Let's press play.
Okay, folks, I need you to snap up and pay attention. We've got a serious crisis on our hands. While you were out trick-or-treating with your family, American banks were headed to the federal government with their hands out, getting a second, not their first, their second emergency infusion of cash. This is old Texas Paul. Hope your coffee's as good as mine. Hell, I hope it's better. I really do. Folks, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. If you don't know what the repo markets are, it's a quick emergency loans. Think about it as a payday loan for banks.
Because
they trade in their really solid assets like bonds for quick emergency loans. They only do it when they're out of cash.
They went to the pawn shop,
headed towards insolvency. This is not something that they do at this level. There was over $50 billion. We haven't had something this big. They didn't do a $50 billion chunk during COVID.
Come on.
Folks, we've known that Trump's idiot trade war was wrecking the global economy. We knew these tariffs were going to be a disaster. We knew the banks are actually deeper into derivatives now than they were during the 2007 crash that they created.
That's a bad thing.
Folks, this is serious. You need to pay attention to this. Republicans are out there. They've got our government shut down. They aren't even in Washington, D.C. to do their damn jobs. And Trump and Nutlick are clueless. They're so busy with these tariffs thinking they're going to shift their tax burdens onto working people that they have no freaking clue they're driving our banks into insolvency. This is a big deal. This is a huge red flag.
It really is. And if you're not yet concerned, you're not paying attention. Your bank had to go to the pawn shop. They had to get a payday loan. They broke. They ain't got the resources. They not liquid. They ain't got no liquidity. Okay, this is a problem because we're in a moment right now where the poor people is poor, the banks are poor, and we got to think about that because your president wants to go to war with Venezuela, Colombia. Oh, and checking notes, Nigeria. Why America talking about invading Nigeria? Donald Trump has claimed that he wants to invade Nigeria because we got to protect the Christians. There are Christians in Nigeria who are being abused. They're being beheaded and blown up. Now, the reality is that is happening. There are Christians in Nigeria who are massively coming under a whole host of stressors. And later on in the podcast, which will come out later on today, Lurie breaks it down, you will hear a video clip from Shola Moss who explains why this is happening. In summation, because I'm running up against the clock, basically, Nigeria has been a space where, quite frankly, you have extremists who are essentially destroying the livelihoods of not just Christians, but Muslims as well. In fact, I mean, you know, we do have time. We got time, right? I can do this clip. I can do this. We're going to do this. All right. Let's play this video clip. This is Shola Moss. She is going to talk to us about what is happening in Nigeria because it's not just Christians who are having their churches bombed. Muslims are having their asses handed to them, having their mosques bombed because this is not about religious battles in Nigeria. This is about terrorism in Nigeria. And frankly, there's an oil connection. You know, there's always an oil connection. Amina, I know we're going to come up against the clock, but if you could please get this video clip from Shola Moss, let's hear what she has to say.
Donald Trump has designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Now, I need you to apply the brain cells God gave you and ask yourself why. According to Trump, quote unquote, thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. Now, two things can be true. One, Christians are being persecuted and slaughtered. But two, it isn't just Christians who are being massacred and slaughtered. No, it's Christians and Muslims who are being slaughtered, who are being persecuted, who are being displaced by, yes, militant groups, terrorists, like Boko Haram and the Islamic West Africa province. But why is it that Trump is framing this as a religious persecution against Christians alone by Islamists? Now, people, Islamist is a whole new word that these dumbass supremacists, be them Zionists or white supremacists, have come up with. And apparently any Muslim is an Islamist. That's bullshit. Let's just say for now that Islamists are those who weaponize Islam, just like Zionists are those who weaponize Judaism, and white national Christians are those who weaponize Christianity. Can you see? They're all extremists. But I digress. Why are they shaping this as religious war against Christians when Muslims have been attacked at the same rate as Christians and for the same decades as Christians have? Their mosques are being attacked, bombed, and burnt. And now Muslims and Christians in Nigeria share the same enemy. Oh, about the suicide bombing that's been happening for years that kills Muslims. They don't tell you that because it doesn't suit their narrative. The narrative of the geopolitics of the West, that Islam is the enemy and Muslims are terrorists. Again, Nigerian Christians and Muslims are being attacked, killed, persecuted. Churches and mosques being blown up and being firebombed by the same enemy. Trump, the United States, United Kingdom, the West do not give a rat's ass about Nigeria or Nigerians. They only care about what they can exploit from Nigeria. And right now, this narrative about a religious war.
Let's pause it right there. You'll be able to hear the full video clip in the podcast. But the reason this is so important is because the other thing that's happening in Nigeria, Donald Trump don't give a rat's ass about Christians in Nigeria. As she goes on to say, to the extent that you missed it, if that were the case, he would allow for asylum seekers to come from Nigeria. But he canceled Wole Soyinka's visa over the weekend. He's canceling visas. He called Nigeria a shithole country. He's not letting Nigerian Christians come over here. In fact, the only people who he's allowing to come over are the 7,500 white South African colonizers who are being allowed back into the country. So why on earth would Donald Trump be thinking about invading a country simply because there is one group that is being targeted when we know that there are multiple groups that are being targeted, and it's got to be the oil? According to Business Insider Africa, the Dangote oil refinery, which initially planned for 650,000 barrels per day in production, is now aiming to be the largest single train refinery globally. Aliko Dangote, a brother from Nigeria, announced intentions options to expand refinery capacity to 1.4 million barrels a day, which would surpass the world's largest refinery in Jamnagar, India. I'm sorry, I know I mispronounced that. My apologies, my tongue has been colonized. There was an intermediate upgrade, according to the report, in capacity to 700,000 barrels per day that is scheduled by the end of 2025. The refinery's current output reached 610,000 barrels per day in August 2025. They want the oil. They're going to Nigeria not because of the Christians, but because they want the oil. And they're wanting the oil because what they're crystal clear about is that if Venezuela, which has already been in negotiations with China, already backed by Russia, Nigeria, which has a far more established relationship with China than it does America, thanks to Donald Trump's anti-Africa policies, everybody else is getting set up and America is about to get kicked to the curb. That's why they want to invade Nigeria. That's why they are hoping that they will be able to make a lot of white American Christian nationalists agree with this religious fervor that they should have to save the Christians in Nigeria. Well, if you were serious about it, let them immigrate. Open the borders, but you won't do that. Now, according to Papi Chulo Negro on Threads, he provided a wonderful thread that I'm going to share with you because I thought it summarized it in really powerful ways. And he says, if you think Trump's ire towards Nigeria is because of the persecuted Christians, you're sadly mistaken. For decades, Africa drills the oil, the West refines it, and Africa buys it back at triple the price. Nigeria's Dangote changed the game by refining 650,000 barrels a day at home, which means less tankers from Texas to Nigeria. That's energy freedom, bad for the U.S., good for Africa. Then Dangote started trading in currencies other than the dollar. So you can see where this is going. Because Dangote is like, why would we establish oil refineries elsewhere? Why would we send the oil that needs to be refined somewhere else? We have infrastructure here. We don't need to establish infrastructure anywhere else. You know how Donald Trump is like, we want manufacturing in America, like buy American for American. Well, Nigeria is like, well, we can actually do that. America, you can't do that because for the past several decades, you have essentially outsourced all of your manufacturing because you like cheap shit. And because Americans like cheap shit and don't have a good economic system that would allow people to earn enough money to pay for their cheap shit, you outsource all the manufacturing to countries where basically they are paying people pennies on the dollar because the Americans would require too much to do that same work. And now the other countries are like, well, we got all the manufacturing capacity that we need. We got all the resources that we need. Why would we need to send our resources to America to be refined only to buy it back from America at triple the cost? Papi Chulo Negro goes on to say, Nigeria is making deals with China and India in refined oil products. Funding from China and technology from India. America is watching this like a scorned ex. Your president didn't care about persecuted Christians. He cares about the dollars he and his oil buddies are losing. The thread continues. And just to add, there are Christians in Gaza, says Papi Chulo Negro. That is correct. Lots of Christians in Gaza. Do you think Trump cared about those Christians? But somehow he cares about some black Christians in northern Nigeria. Baby, read the news. Please read international news sources. Please. And then not to say that international news sources are phenomenally accurate. You have to have some wisdom about which sources you are going to tap into and which sources you are not. But baby, they don't care about no black African Christians. They don't care a lick about Nigerian Christians. They care lots of licks about the oil. Lots of licks about the oil and their ability to control it. It's the same reason they're looking at Venezuela, which has like the Western Hemisphere's version of vibranium in terms of rare earth minerals. Now, they were able to get a whole lot vis-a-vis Argentina. Remember, we just gave Argentina, what was it, $40 billion? Sorry for you hungry people. Ain't no food for you because we got to pay Argentina. So Scott Besson's besties are Secretary of Treasury. So his best friends who over-index in their gambling and their bets on the quality of the Argentinian economy will be able to not lose their shirts, and we get access to their rare earth minerals. I said we, like I'm in power. The Americans get access to the rare earth minerals. So here we have it, folks. SNAP is broken, but so is your bank and the banking system. The tariffs suck. This is all going to redound to horrors. And you know what we are doing about it? We're not spending any money. That's what we're doing. We're not going out to protest because now ICE is really amping up. They are doing all sorts of things. We'll talk about that later on this week. We're not going outside to protest. Not we as the blacks. Now, some of you have told me, Lurie, I did have to go out there. I wanted to march. I'm one of the people who marched. I said, go with God, sister. Go with God, brethren. Do report back. We need some spies in the camp to be able to go out and find out what's happening. Let us know how the whites are doing with their protests. But we have other options. Like not spending our money, like talking to our little beautifully black melanated children about how this Christmas, we're going to do something for community. We're not doing a whole bunch of gifts under the tree. Frankly, mommy and daddy are probably going through some financial struggles right now, and we need everybody to do their share to make this world a better place. And even though mommy and daddy are parents, or mommy and daddy, it don't matter to me. However your family structure is structured, so long as you got love and some sort of appreciation for humanity in it, go with God. But mommies and your parents, let's put it that way, your parents aren't going to be doing the same things that we usually do, because right now there's a lot of people hurting. And instead of putting up a whole bunch of gifts under the tree, we're going to engage in acts of service to help make our community better. We're going to be talking to our children about what mutual aid looks like, because if the supermarkets are being threatened with having their ability to make money in the future, and that is enough to have them not participate in giving food to people who need SNAP, then we got to over-index and going to, yes, black supermarkets, if you got them, but really need to over-index on picking up grocery buddies. You got people in your family who's hungry, buy some groceries, buy some extra food, provide for them. And we know that that's not going to be enough, because for every meal that a charity can provide, SNAP can provide 9. You all voted for, those of you who did, who either stayed home and didn't vote at all, or those of you who voted for this madness, you voted for the most diabolical, evil, devastatingly horrific nincompoopery that we have ever seen in my lifetime. And as a result of this, poor people are really hungry right now. There were hundreds of stories of people this week trying to get access to food as best they can. I saw a video of a black woman filling up a white woman's gas tank. I don't know if it was AI, but it was beautiful. Although I was like, sis, let's make sure there were some things about it that I would have done differently, but I'm just saying, people are trying to engage in acts of service the best that they can, and I need us to double, triple, and quadruple down with that. Start having conversations with your kids now. Start having conversations with your family members right now. We ain't going to be doing no big old Christmas. We can do a big old Kwanzaa, because big old Kwanzaa is about us making gifts, buying books, right? Making sure we're learning, making things with our hands, buying and supporting from black-owned businesses. And if you are buying things, let it be from black-owned businesses. FUBU forever. They have abandoned us. They have said, we don't like you blacks. We don't even want you here. And frankly, they're doing everything they can to re-enslave us. So be watchful of that, and be reminded, for those of you who don't mind seeing, migrants and immigrants being tossed up, raked up, and scooped up by ICE, just remember, they are coming for black people. That's the whole Office of Remigration's effort. They're going to start first with the Browns, but they will certainly end up with the blacks. We got to move different, because the Republicans have not been in office. They have not been in at work since September. The Democrats are in Washington, D.C. right now. And I think this is all really a part of Project 2025's ultimate goal, which is to completely break the government and create a king. Because they want kings. They want techno kings. And they want J.D. Vance, I think, to be the king. Also, Usha Vance, girl, why is your husband on stage with that other woman's hands wrapped up, tied up, and tangled up in the nape of his head? We're going to talk about that tomorrow. J.D. Vance and Erica Kirk, y'all make quite a pair on that stage with looking at each other's eyes. And J.D. Vance, why was your hand on her leather encased hip? I don't know, but we'll talk about that later. They have decided they want a king. That king is J.D. Vance, Donald Trump. You should be watchful, because I don't think they mean no good for you, but it is what it's going to be. You already made more money hand over fist than any other point in your presidency, in your life, quite frankly. This is the most profitable you ever been, and all you're doing is bankrupting the country. You didn't even have to bankrupt an eighth business. Look at that. Look at you. Anyway, we are done here. YouTube, we appreciate you. Urban View, I want to thank you all so